So without further ado, please welcome Lisa Marie Rankin to the show. Welcome, Lisa.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. You sent me your beautiful book, and I have it right here. And I was reading it, and it's been sitting on my coffee time in the morning as I read it, because it's one of those fun books where you can open it up and just learn one little thing. And, I've said in the introduction, it's what it's called, the goddess solution. But, going back to understanding, when we get to this age, late 40s, early 50s, and we have a life story and we have where we've, learned our lessons and we followed the yellow brick road and we've picked up the breadcrumbs and we've taken the Y in the road and realized it was the wrong Y, and then getting back on track and, keep going forward and pushing past the fear. And knowing that everything in our life is really, is perfect, no matter how you look at it. If you think it's bad, it's perfect. And such a great feeling to get to this point in your life, to look back and go, gosh, look at those little breadcrumbs I picked up. I did it because I listened to that intuition and I followed through. I pushed past the fear. And now look what I learned, and look at what I've, been able to teach people and be the guiding light because of my experiences. And I think we get to this midlife of our time and to come to the place where we want to, teach and share because of our experiences. And those experiences are like things that people would be so valuable in their life, and I feel that way that's kind of where you're at in your life with this book and what you've done in writing all those blogs, and are beautiful writing, by the way, like amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And the way you write in your book, there's certain people that you read, you've read a million books in your life, but you talk to me like you're my friend in the book. So it's so easy to read. And I find it like I am talking to my friend as I read your book. But I wanted to go into, because I related to your story back when you're kind of where you started, like the regular Lisa life, where you started off working and going to college and got married, had your kids, but kind of go back there just so we kind of get an understanding. Because I think when people understand that when people, you don't have to live your life because people tell you you're supposed to go to college, you're supposed to get a job, you have your family, you get married, have your family. And then even if you're miserable, just keep going. Because
Yeah,
that's what you're supposed to do, right?
right. I know. And it's funny because I feel like if you look at my life, like from college on, like to mid 30s was so prescriptive. It's like, if there was a rule book, I had followed it perfectly. It's like, I went to a 4-year college, left to go to New York City, spent 5 years working there, came back, went to grad school, got married, had 2 babies, did well in the corporate world. But then it was sometime in my 30s, mid 30s, it started to feel like everything seemed very unintentional. It's like, I always say it's kind of like that Talking Head song. Like, it's like, this is not my beautiful house. Like when did I make these conscious decisions? And I mean, of course, I was thrilled to have my 2 beautiful children. So that was never in question. But it was just, I felt like I was doing all of these things because I was supposed to do them, or because they were set out before me. And it seemed like everybody else was doing them, but not because like I had intentionally chose them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as my marriage was starting to devolve and I was becoming more uninspiring with work, and it was also as I was approaching 40, and it's kind of like, and I think I've read somewhere that we make these big changes like on different decades. And I can kind of understand that, because it's like, you kind of think like, well, what's the next 10 years going to be like? And it's just, you start to see that time is starting to go by quicker. And I started to make a lot of changes. So I had ended my marriage. I had left the corporate world to embark on creative pursuits, and really just started to say like, well, what would I do if I wasn't scared? Like if I wasn't nervous about, and by scared, I mean like if I wasn't nervous about what other people thought about me. Like it took me a long time to even like write and post things on my blog, because I'd be like, what will the women in my community think? What will that girl that was like mean to me in high school think? And it's like, these things prevent us from doing stuff that really shouldn't be a factor.
Right. Isn't that fun though, to get to a place in your life that it doesn't matter what anybody thinks? I love it's such a free feeling. I love the feeling of, even having this podcast and bringing on guests that, might be different. I'll go, oh, this will kind of touch somebody and then other people will like, whoa, where is she coming from? Like, yeah, I can just see it. But
Yeah.
when you realize that, when you're being led and you're listening to your intuition and you're just going with it, because it's all about just going with what you feel
Right.
and believe, then it's touch whoever. And it's people that come back and I go, wow, it touched you. I never thought it would. It's just fun. I just think it's so fun to live in a place like that. And I love that you do too.
Yeah, no, it is. And it definitely had taken some time to get there, because I think for, especially when I was younger, it's almost like you craft this facade or persona that you think is going to be acceptable to other people. And then you start to realize like you've created a little prison for yourself, and it's like, well, what would I really do if I want, if I was just free to do whatever I want?
When you realized your marriage was not for you, how did you, when you were attracted him, like what were because I think a lot of your lessons, there's a lot of relationship. You teach a lot of people about relationships and intimacy and all that. But I loved the Wayne Dyer quote, you don't attract what you want, you attract who you are. Yes. Because when I teach my classes or with my friends and they're on their journey to find love at, in their 40s or 50s, and, to come back to a place where, who you are is what you're attracting. But who you are, if you realize you're attracting the same people over and over again, there needs to be a shift.
Right. And
explain to me that
big, like kind of aha moment for me. And I think for me, and I think I talk about this, I know in the book and in essays, like I've always, I love men. I do. And I've always found it easy to attract men. I think they sense that, that I enjoy men and, I have fun with them, but I haven't always attracted the right ones, like, or at least the ones that I would have claimed to want. And I think one of the reasons was, even though I found it fairly easy to attract men, once I'd get into a relationship with someone, I got really needy. So like had that very anxious attachment style. So I would end up being with men who would be like calling or texting 25 times a day. And, it took me like 40 years to figure out, if someone has that much time to call and text me throughout the day, they probably don't have, a lot going on.
So
and
funny.
It really got, and then that quote by Wayne Dyer, that you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are, really kind of got me thinking about what I was coming into relationships with. And I was looking for validation that I was still desirable, that I was worthy, that, I was lovable. And I was attracting the same. I was also attracting men that wanted those same things, and at first it feels really good, right? Like it feels like your needs are coming together. But it started to realize that like these two gaping wounds, they don't complete one another. It just has a bigger gaping wound, it's just a bigger hole. So it wasn't really until I started to kind of work on myself, understand why it was that I was like craving this external validation, and really kind of being okay with not having it, was I able to really attract a partner that is the healthiest relationship I've ever been in. And ironically, it's so different than the other ones. Like, I used to love getting all of these like text and phone calls, and, he does not text or, call that often. And that's been really hard for me at different times. Like, is everything okay? And it's just, it's just not his style. Verbal affirmations and like isn't his, but, he shows his love in other ways. And, I feel like I've grown a lot from that as well.
When you look back at your marriage, when you had your children, what do you see where were you at and why did you attract that person?
Well, it's interesting. So I met my husband after I had lived in New York City for 5 years. And I remember thinking like, I had some nice boyfriends in New York, but that pace there can be very like shallow, very fast paced. And it was just kind of, I felt like a lot of it was very superficial. So I came back home into the Boston area. And I think at the time, again, he just put so much attention onto me, made me feel like, I was like the only woman in the world. And I was like, this is what a relationship is supposed to be like. But it ended up being like, just, I don't know if it was, I would say very kind of like codependent, or, I eventually started to feel like he needed me too much, that I was like in the relationship, that I was taking care of too much, that I just, there wasn't the sovereignty or autonomy that I felt like there should be between like two adults.
Right.
But at the time it was attractive because it was like, wow, look at all of this, attention that I'm getting. And he seems so sincere and so authentic. But, I was kind of only seeing what I wanted to see. There was also some red flags there too. But I think at that age, at 29, there's like, oh, well, we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. Things will fall into place. But it's like, I guess my advice to other people would be like, those red flags that you see early on, they stay, so unless you address them right away, they don't just disappear. Like it's the same, it's generally the reason why I think things end up devolving for people, were the things that people noticed very early on.
Right. I agree. I'd ask you that question because I think I was at the same age with you where I got married for a year and not the right, I knew it wasn't right. I think I was doing it like you said, like, okay, well, all my friends were married. They had their first child and I hadn't even met the one yet. And I thought I'm late and I panic, and then you feel like, well, I'll just make this work. And then realizing while you're in it, like, I wasn't my true self. And now that I look back and I know it's part of my plan and it was all perfect and I needed that experience. And, when you look back at those little, I don't know, windows of time that you had those experiences and then the light bulb goes off and you're like, okay, I'm not living my authentic self. And it wasn't that feeling where I know what it feels like today, especially. But then when you move from that moment to, take that next Y in the road and really take that step. And I've helped people like, you just got to go, and I think part of what in my life where I've empowered these people to, once you take that step, oh my gosh, I promise you, like you'll get into this more truer place of who you truly are. And that's when the magic starts to happen in your life, and always in that authenticity. But when I love to hear when women are strong enough to realize that even in that moment, I made the wrong choice, but I can still change it and it's okay.
Right. And that's what I actually talk about in my book a lot too, is that we can change our mind at any time. Just because, we've started out in one direction, we can learn, we can evolve, we can say no, we can change course. Because I think sometimes we feel like, oh, well, I did, like I got married or I got the job. It's like, I should stay the course. We don't need to stay the course. Like I always like to think, like part of like our divine feminine energy, it's like we can explore. I always say like masculine energy is like that ladder, it's point A to point B. Like when we start to kind of embrace that more feminine creative force, it's more about exploration. It's more like a jungle gym,
Right.
And we can make these lateral moves.
When you talk about masculine and feminine energy, I love that because I had an aha moment when I was at Date with Destiny and with Tony Robbins when I turned 50. I went there for my birthday.
Oh, nice.
And we had to dance as a feminine. And I realized in my life, I've been so masculine. I really, when you don't have a partner for all of my life, up until I'm, in my 30s, then it's like I had to fend for myself. I was in charge, and then you get married and you're like, okay, I need to figure out how to have the feminine side. And it's so important to know that. And I realized, I thought, gosh, Ashley, it was so interesting because it's just an opening to know that we all have both sides, like the yin and the yang, right? And to be aware of when your feminine works in this thing and your masculine comes in this one. But explain that, because I think you explain that in a neat way.
Sure. Yeah. So like you said, we all have masculine and feminine energy, and it really doesn't even have anything to do with where you are on the gender spectrum. It's just the different energies that we embody. And masculine energy tends to be like very directive, linear, structured. We see it in like big corporations, our education system. It's very hierarchical. And then feminine energy, on the other hand, is more linear, circular, collaborative. Like we'd see it in relationships or even like startups, if you wanted to use the business metaphor, where everyone kind of has different roles and it's more creative. Masculine is based more on reasoning and like that analytical mind, where feminine energy is based more on intuition. Now, I would suspect that all of us in this society have developed way more masculine energy just because that's what we've been taught. It's like
Right.
we really try to think our way through, how to solve a problem. And we don't really rely on our intuition as much. And a lot of that is because we spend so much time in our mind, we're on devices a lot. It's just a very cerebral process. But I think feminine energy is really coming back and trusting your intuition and not necessarily looking for a specific outcome, but also just being able to explore and being able to just let things divinely unfold, like kind of cultivating that sense of faith that things are going to happen as they happen. We don't need to control it, like kind of white knuckles I like picture on the steering wheel, but we can take a step back. It's more receptive. So I like to think of that too, because I always say I'm kind of like this like type A hippie. Like I also was very much like career. I've got my notes, I've got my to-do list and stuff. And it's taken me some time. It's just like, well, we can't control other people. We can't control events, but we can control ourselves and we can kind of set an example for others. And then we can step back and we don't have to push so hard.
Right. I love that.
So it's
And
also kind of like learning to receive. Yeah.
yes, so true. Yeah. I really resonate with that because, as a mom too, like because I have two girls, you have a girl and a boy, right?
I do. Yes.
Yeah. So mine are 12 and 15 and yours are right there too. So
Same age.
similar age, and raising kids with like, as a mom, and you're a single mom, and how to, I'm sure the dad's part of their life, but
Yes.
explain how you raise, like as a single mom raising with feminine and male energy, your son and daughter, what is your, like your intention, or what do you, as a mom, what do you focus on in your daily life with them?
Well, I mean, I try to provide them like with the structure and, making sure that they have access to the opportunities that they want to have. I definitely probably have a more feminine approach to parenting. And I think I always kind of have. It's always been a little bit more nurturing as opposed to like, you need to get this and this done. I've probably always been a little too lax, like, oh, honey, that's okay. Don't worry about it, so.
Right.
But it seems to work. I mean, my kids are doing really well, and they have that. It's they do have a lot of they have their father in their life. They have my partner who's been in their life for some time. I live next door to my parents, so they have my stepfather. So they have a lot of good, like they have male influences in their life, because I definitely don't feel that I bring that alpha like that strong structure to the table. But I think they do feel that. But I generally have everything under control.
Yeah.
So.
I just always love, because I teach kids, teenagers through my Raising Confidence course. They're the mindset tools to empower them, because I feel like they need to have that before they leave the house, because I feel like in my 20s, I didn't have an intention. I didn't know what I was doing. I changed my major so many times and, just kind of like had a million different jobs, but to have clarity as a mom, knowing that you're raising these kids to, to be empowered, to know that they can do or have anything, and to be clear and have the clarity of what they intend to want when they leave our little nest that we've had them in for 18 years. Anyway, but I want to go back to when you quit your job, your corporate job, you got divorced, you started writing in a blog.
Yes.
And then someone discovered you and wanted you to write a book.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So it's as I was nearing the end of my corporate, before I had actually like given my notice or decided to leave, like one day I was just like, I'm going to, write a blog about goddesses and how like women can take inspiration from them. And it was kind of interesting because the idea had just came to my mind. And I remember telling that to my boyfriend, and he's very practical as a lawyer, engineer. And he's like, okay, I could have just told him that I was going to start breeding unicorns, and I probably would have made about as much sense to him.
Right.
But I had submitted it to a Medium publication, and then I didn't think anything would come of it because I've never shared my writing with the world. And 2 weeks later, they had emailed and they're like, oh, we love these stories. We would love to do a series. And this was the time where Medium publications were even paying, and they're like, we'll give you $150 like for a story. And like, you would have thought I won the lottery. I was like, this is the greatest. Because funny. I think it was just such like, oh, I can do something different. Like there's like something else that I find inspiring and enjoyable that I want to share. And it was like the first time that I guess I had gotten the recognition that maybe other people would find this interesting too.
Right.
So I often say it was like kind of winning the lottery, but even better because it was that it kind of helped shift my mindset about what was possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I had started writing that. And then shortly thereafter, I was like, I'm going to take a break from the corporate world, thinking that it was just going to be like a 6-month sabbatical. I was going to spend more time with my children, write, maybe find something closer to home. And then I had gotten an email and it was said HarperCollins calling in the subject line. And at first I thought it was almost like some sort of like, I don't know, scam or something, but it wasn't. And yeah, and about 1.5 years later, I had a book.
So they read your blog. That's how that works. I mean, that's how when they approach you to write a book.
I mean, I don't know if that's how it works for everyone. That's how it works
but
for me.
but I mean, they can look and find somebody who they really love what they've been writing and then approach them with a book deal.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean,
That's amazing.
I still wrote the proposal for, like I talked to the editor, we talked about it, then I went, back and I kind of had it in the back of my mind that, oh, this would make a good book at some point. So it wasn't like it was the first time I had ever thought of a book proposal. Like I had already had a template printed out, just thinking I'd get around to it at some point. So yeah, so I felt like I was almost fairly prepared for it. So maybe that was part of like the manifesting, I kind of had the idea, I had printed out a book proposal template. So yeah, so we went through that and it just, it came together really pretty quickly, actually.
Well, the way it's written is, I get it, because I see how it is a template in a way, and how you have the affirmations and the meditations after each one. But the thing I want to talk about is the goddess, the message that I feel like your intuition, you listen to, and you're like, something about goddesses is something I need to like tell the world about, and why it's so relevant to our lives now. But to read about it, because I was never aware. I mean, I've heard of them, but I'm not very well read or understand them. But go into why the goddess was what you think now, going back, like why did that come into your
just sure. So it's kind of interesting because I've always been in. Are you still with me? It looks like you might have froze.
I'm with you.
Okay, just a little froze for a second. But I had always been interested in spirituality and yoga, and that has always been a big part of my life. But I also hadn't spent a lot of time considering goddesses. But it was shortly after my divorce. I remember, again, like I was kind of looking outside of myself for validation. And, I was probably spending too much time trying to curate my appearance or worrying about whether somebody was going to text me or not. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, I don't feel like a goddess, like I just felt like a little bit disempowered. Like I was just, there were things outside of myself that I felt like I was lacking. And that kind of sent me on this quest, like, well, I'm going to learn, like, what does a goddess feel like? And that really kind of started driving me through. And I started to investigate like different goddesses across cultures, across traditions. And I was like, wow, these really are great archetypes for women to look at, to kind of get as a model of behavior. And all of these myths are still very much relevant to what we go through as women today. So I thought it was just kind of a very strong and powerful way for women to kind of keep their femininity because, God, but also just give them a framework for how to make sense of the different situations in their life as well, too. So like, that's why in my book, I write about, getting over unrequited love or the challenges of co-parenting and abundance. So they're still applicable to this day.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting to me, because I was reading about, there's like the four, you have to have the balance of all four.
With Lakshmi, the four aims in life.
Yes, will you explain that? Because that kind of caught my eye.
Sure. Yeah, I love that one. So Lakshmi is the Hindu goddess of love, abundance, fortune, and beauty. And she has 4 arms. And in Hinduism, they represent the 4 aims in life. And these are like the four things you need in balance to have a happy life. And the first one is called Artha. And that's all about material goods. So that's kind of like, you could think of that as our shelter, our food, just all of the things that we can possess and the things that we need to survive. Now, I feel like in our culture, we kind of just focus on Artha as abundance. And we kind of think like, this is what abundance means. But that's just one. So it's like 25%. Then there's Kama. And that's like all of our emotional pleasure. Like, are we enjoying something? Do we have fulfilling relationships? Like, are we having a good sex life? Like, these are important too, like our emotional and our ability to experience pleasure. And then there's Dharma. Are we living our life's purpose? Are we doing something? Do we feel that we have meaning in the world? And then there's moksha, and that's like spiritual liberation. So do we have a spiritual practice where we can kind of weather the inevitable ups and downs of life, that we've developed some sense of equanimity? So it's really all four that need to be in balance for us to live a happy, fruitful life. So Lakshmi is often like shown with gold coins from her hands, like that she gives to her devotees as far as like the external abundance, but she also gives folks inner abundance as well too, that comes with like grace and gratitude and generosity.
Huh. When you teach your students, when they come to you with your class, the goddess solution, is that what it's called?
Yes. Yeah.
Are they coming because they want to get, what are they seeking?
A lot of them are just seeking to feel better about themselves as well. So it's whether it's like looking for external validation. A lot of them have habits that they're looking to kind of overcome, whether it's maybe like emotional eating or kind of just negative self-talk. So it's really kind of, again, coming back to feeling sovereign and feeling empowered and
When
feeling
you,
confident.
if someone comes to you and they have they have negative self-talk, what are you, so, okay, what do you do? To teach them about a goddess that empowers them through that?
Well, we in my course we have 6 different archetypes that we look at. So that one would probably be in the Morrigan archetype, which is she's the Celtic goddess of death and magic. And we look at our difficult emotions and where they come from. So we do some differentiation. So it's like that negative self-talk. Like if we differentiate that, so that's not your higher self, that's not your inner goddess, and start to understand like where that's coming from, whether it's like the inner critic, and thinking that like, okay, this self-talk, it's trying to protect you, it's trying to help you, like, but what can we say? Like, how do we differentiate ourselves so we're not reacting from this negative self-talk? And we're also not believing it. We're learning to differentiate ourselves from that and really kind of connect with that inner resource, or like I call it the inner goddess.
When you talk about intuition, how would you describe your intuition?
Intuition is really that feeling that you have when you know either that something feels really good or something feels not so great. So I talk a lot about it in my program, as it's like, I don't like to say good or bad, but it's like that intuition of like, this is going to bring me closer to my highest self, and this is going to bring me further away from it. So in Ayurveda, there's the term Samyoga, which are like, these are the activities that bring me closer to my higher self. And these are the activities. So it's really kind of using that discernment and feeling like, well, what's the path that I would like to go on? And is this something that's coming from my heart, from my highest self, or is this kind of coming from my ego? Is it trying to keep me safe, or is it trying to get something so I feel better about myself? But really kind of starting to understand like our motivation behind things.
Right. And how do you teach people to decipher if it's coming from their higher self or their ego self?
Well, when to start asking the question. So if somebody is looking for, like, let's just use an example, like somebody's looking for a promotion, it's like, okay, well, why do you want that promotion at work? Is it like, do you want more money? Do you want to feel successful and smart? And then just keep going deeper. Like, well, why do you want the money? Do you want it as a status? Do you want to be able to support your children through college? And kind of getting behind the why, and just kind of going deeper and deeper. And then you start to figure out like, okay, so it's not so much about this position, but I want to feel safe and secure, and I want to support my children. Or I want to feel like smart, and I want people to look up after me, and I feel like I should be a VP at this point or something, and
Right.
it starts to kind of get to the point. And we know like just these external appearances aren't actually going to, like, even if you got the VP position at that point, you're not going to necessarily feel any smarter, or you feel like you've made it, because again, you're looking for something outside of yourself to feel better about yourself. So it's really just a big process of self-inquiry and exploration.
Right. I think,
Yeah.
learning at my age, like really tuning into that intuition and knowing how important that is, and how many people, don't listen to their intuition or aren't aware of that little voice that they think is just them saying, go this way, go that way, when, and to trust, and really surrender. I love those two words, because I feel that's such a powerful place to live in, is the trusting and knowing that you are listening to your intuition and it is your higher self. And, give me, so I've been interviewing a lot of people lately that we talk about, connecting to your higher self, and yours is the goddess. So when you're talking about connecting to the goddess within you,
Mhm.
can you relate that to that at all? Like,
Yes,
where does
it's
that
like
come in?
it's basically, it would be the same as saying connecting to your highest self. So it's kind of
Okay.
that inner resource or inner wisdom. So I call it the inner goddess, but it could be, it's the same as you would say like your highest self, and
And
staying
so
aligned with that.
you believe, so in your mind, like you're putting the goddess as your, like your, as your soul, the bigger part of your soul that's inside your body. Like it's like this woman that I had on, it was just amazing. So she's like, a sliver of your soul is inside of this human body, and the rest is your higher self. And it's just like, it's endless, it's infinity. Your soul is ever lasting. But is that what you mean? I want your impact over your take on that.
The way I often describe it to, like, I think sometimes when we hear goddess, we think of these deities outside of ourselves, and we could definitely practice with them as a deity outside of ourselves. But the way I generally teach them and practice them is that they're not a deity, they're an aspect of your highest self. So these archetypes give us keys that unlock different aspects of ourselves. So Carl Jung talked a lot about the collective unconscious, where we have all of these kind of deity archetypes, and we have access to these energetics. So it's like, for example, like if you wanted more passion in your life, maybe you would start connecting with Aphrodite. If you wanted more courage because you had a conflict coming up. And I always say, like, I am more of a love and creativity goddess, I am not a courage one, so these are the ones that I need to generally tap into. That could be like Durga, the Hindu goddess of strength and justice, and you start to learn about them and understand their attributes. And if we want the goddess in our life, we start acting like her. So we can start thinking like, well, what would this, how would this goddess do? But they kind of give us a framework or a model for different energetics that we want to build within us.
So, okay, I'm understanding better now. So when you're like, when you find something that, you're on, you need to work toward, and you find a goddess that has those attributes, you act as if you are that goddess.
Yeah, you can kind of think like, okay, like how would, you're feeling anxious in a relationship, and it's like, okay, like what's your inner Aphrodite? It's like she enjoyed being in relationships, but she was also sovereign. She entered and exited them on her own accord. She wasn't a martyr. She kept her sovereignty. She pursued her desires. She pursued her whims. So you could kind of look to her to kind of start to cultivate those types of attributes.
Okay. So when you think of all these goddesses, there's how many?
Oh God, there's thousands. I think there's
Thousands.
38 in my book, but
Okay, well, that's what I was reading, because I was like, oh my gosh. So Mary Magdalene was how to overcome your limiting beliefs.
yeah.
Explain that. What is she? Why is she that?
So Mary Magdalene, so some people might not consider her a goddess, but I think generally she has many of the attributes as a goddess. And you can think of Mary Magdalene because as far as like the story with Jesus, there's a lot of questioning like what their relationship was, but pretty much by the literature you could see she's called the apostle of the apostles because she understood his teachings more than any of the other apostles. But some would even say she was his teacher too. So we don't know, there's a lot of conflicting, but let's just assume that she was also enlightened and also a spiritual master, probably on the same level as Jesus. And nobody really believed her, but she didn't need that. She knew, she had that inner wisdom. She didn't need anybody else's kind of acknowledgement or validation from anybody else. Like she was very confident in her relationship with Jesus and with her understanding of the teachings, with who she was as a woman. So she could, she trusted her own kind of inner self. She was her own teacher, her own guru.
Oh, I love that. That is, to think of, I get how you can use these women, these people as like, look at what she did, how she overcame. Right. It's so powerful. Okay. And I want to ask you about which one was I wanted to ask you? Is it Demeter?
Oh, Demeter, the Greek goddess of grain harvest. Yes.
Yes. Tell me about that.
So in my book, I talk a lot about Demeter is, so she's the loving, sustaining energy. So she makes the crops grow. She's also a loving and protective mama. So her daughter Persephone was abducted and she was in the underworld for 6 months out of the year with Hades, the god of the underworld. So generally that's depicted as fall and winter. So Demeter's energy kind of shuts off when her daughter leaves to be with her husband. So that's when all the crops die and, everything kind of just ends. And then when Demeter comes back for it to spend spring and summer, that's when all the crops go. So Demeter has the energy. So I talk about Demeter a lot because I think in a lot of the myths, Demeter, you would think that that would be unfortunate that she lost her daughter for 6 months out of the year. But I also talk about, as moms, there's also time that we need to kind of regenerate and kind of continue with ourselves. So I think one thing that has happened with women is that, we've made so many advances in our culture, which is great. It's fantastic. But we are also now like the breadwinners, the supporters of our children. So it's like we've gotten all of these opportunities, which I think we should keep going with, but we've almost given us more responsibility and more obligation. So people, they've done studies. I can't remember the name of the study. I think it's in the book, where even though we've made all of these advancements, we're actually less happy than our men counterparts. And one of the theories is it's because, okay, well, now we have the high powered jobs, but we're still taking care of the kids and we're still doing all of the housework. So I really talk about making sure that you're taking time for yourself as well too. So kind of like Demeter has a couple of months to rest, making sure we have some time to rest. It's not going to be 6 months out of the year. Honestly, offering yourself some grace, that we don't need to be everything to every one of our responsibilities all the time. Like we can choose where to give our focus. And sometimes it's going to be our children, sometimes it will be a partner, sometimes it will be a presentation, but then giving ourselves grace, because balance is tough, right? We're very competent. We have a lot on our plate. So it's really more kind of choosing where to put our focus, and then letting the laundry pile up. That's okay. And
Right.
kind of
I
giving
know.
yourself grace for that.
When, now like I live in this place of, I love doing this podcast. I love doing my, clients and having my Zoom calls and, now having, I raised my daughters up until, 2020 and started doing this. And, that was my everything. I'd fold the clothes and do all the laundry, but I never really had self time. I didn't put apart time for me. And learning from you, learning from all these amazing people that I've had on the guests, self-love is so important. And I think as a mom, showing that to your kids, how important self-love is. So when they are out in the world and they said, well, my mom used to, I just feel like that is so important. Do you
I
do that for
completely agree.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think my children know that, I need some time to get to yoga, to meditate, to work on my projects as well. And it's like, I feel like we bring more energy when we take the time to do the things that energize us. We also bring more energy to our children, right? There's nothing worse than if you feel that you're giving all of your energy, you just start to get depleted. And as you said, I think it's a great example for them too, as well as the woman, is that you don't need, because as women, we're natural caregivers, right? Like we want to nurture, we want to take care of people, we are good at it, but we also have to do that to ourselves too. And I think especially like for our daughters, it's really great to show them that like, no, you're important. And like, as you evolve into a woman, you need to spend time taking care of yourself too, and prioritizing what you want.
Right.
Or else we're teaching them to be like people pleasers, or just kind of being agreeable, which is, I think, something a lot of us have worked hard to overcome.
Right. Oh, I love, just even before I got onto the Zoom call, Paige was texting me about someone, a boy saying you're immature, you didn't share your grades with, or your notes, or the whatever, help me cheat on my test. And she knows her value so much. And we've, gone over that. And I said, just be sweet and loving and say, that's okay if you don't want to be my friend. I'll always be here for you. But it's so cute just to have these little messages. And I, as a mom, and, you think of what we're doing at this age, for what we're giving them every age is so important, but the little tools that they're getting along the way, that we're like embracing them as who they are, but also showing them like, okay, well, they're asking for advice and, all the things, and seeing, okay, well, mom needs to go have self-care, does her Pilates. I do take that time, but I do it. I have an intention behind things, right? Demeter, I guess it's funny that I even asked about that one, because I probably resonate more to that. And it was like my intuition was thinking, tell me about that. But don't you agree with that? I really feel like that's a big thing.
I do. I think it's just important. Yeah. I think because our children, we can say that, you need to take time for yourself, you need to value yourself, but I always say that they're watching what we do, not necessarily what we say.
Right.
So, and especially daughters, I think, they're really using us as a model. So I think it's really important to kind of model like, okay, this is, you are worthy, you can take time for yourself, you don't have to overgive. And Yeah, and I don't think undergiving is going to be in any of our problem. As women, as moms, I think, we're always going to be giving as much as we can. But I think when we can take a step back and also prioritize the things that are important to us, like whether it's like the podcast or the book, and like, I have things that I want to put my energy into too. I think that's also really inspiring for them as well too, because
Yes.
they kind of see this creativity and this passion for things. And I think
Right.
that's wonderful if we can offer our children that type of modeling.
Yes, for sure. And I'm so grateful that, that I realized I had my kids so much later in life that I had all that time. I had to kind of like frame my mind around like be intentional, like, this is so important to program them right. And I just look back and you never want to say I regret something, especially with children. That's like the last thing you want to do. Okay, I want to talk about Freya is another one that caught my eye. Tell
Oh,
me about
yeah.
Freya.
So Freya, she's the Norse goddess she's love, beauty, pleasure. I really love Freya. I actually have a Freya statue right behind me. But what I love about Freya is I think of her as shameless, like, so she just knows what she wants and she goes out and gets it. Like whether it's like this beautiful amber necklace that she slept with 4 dwarfs to get, or she has her feathered cloak, but she kind of just does what she wants. And I think that's a good model for women today, because I think in general we do tend to be agreeable, to people please and stuff. And I know for me too, it's been challenging to be like, this is what I want. It's like I've always taken a more subtle approach, whether it was asking for what I wanted or trying to get what I want. And sometimes that does work, but I love how Freya is just kind of unabashed with her desires and like her sexuality as well too. So I think she's kind of a great model for women to look like. It's like, I don't have to be sweet and demure all the time. I can ask for what I want. I can be desirous. I can, take what I want.
Right. So when you teach your class, and they do a meditation,
Mm-hmm.
so are you teaching it all together? Is there ever one-on-one where you're working with one person to really dig deep into their inner goddess?
I do one-on-one coaching as well too. So generally, at least when people enroll in the class, they'll get at least one-on-one coaching that kind of comes with the class.
And what would you do with that? Like with me, if I came to you and I said, I really want to dig deep into, and you would just, what?
So you're really kind of doing a meditation, like, so, thinking like, once, you've created a sense of calm and stuff, like thinking about what is it that you want? Like, starting to tap into like, well, because I think sometimes in the spiritual community, we think that desire can be bad. Like we should just have a sense of equanimity and be okay with whatever comes. And to some sense, that's good. We should have equanimity, but desire is the reason we get out of bed in the morning, right? Like whether it's desire for a creative project or desire for a person. So getting in touch with the desire, again, it's also asking why you want it, right? Like we want sustaining pleasures. We don't want to like gamble our retirement on Vegas or, drink 3 bottles of wine. So it's really kind of understanding like what is something that I desire that actually is going to like, again, bring me maybe closer to that higher self, or maybe it doesn't even necessarily, but yeah, but what do you want? Like what would feel good to you, and kind of getting in touch with that.
And then once you figure out what they want and you get them to like listen to their intuition or their little voice in their head and they tell you, then what? You find a goddess that would speak to them.
Well, I thought we were talking about Freya in this example. So I was kind of thinking like that would just be kind of a desire.
Got
So
it.
we don't
Oh, I
always
got
have
it.
to tie it back to like a goddess too. Like I think like at the end of that, I mean, we could work with Freya, like if somebody was saying, I really want to have this type of relationship and I'm afraid to ask my partner for this and stuff, like we could work with Freya and be like, all right, well, let's think like Freya, is pretty shameless about asking for what she wants. Like, can we try to connect, with Freya and kind of meditate on her? We'll meditate on the image of her. We'll kind of understand her myth, what she does,
Oh, cool.
kind of building up that confidence to be able to ask for what it is that you want.
Got it. I
Yeah.
love that. So it is through a meditation and a visualization that you become that goddess that you're,
Yeah. Yeah.
huh. Okay. I'm with you. Now I'm getting understanding it. I mean, I guess after reading your book and understanding all the different types. And I guess there's more than, I didn't know there was more than that. But so this was one of them that I wanted to ask, because I have a lot of friends that are searching for a relationship, later in life, in our 50s. And it's Parvati.
Yes,
Parvati. Parvati. It's Parvati.
Parvati. Yeah, she's the Hindu goddess of love and devotion. So,
And would that be someone that you would connect with if someone was
that's
trying?
a really wonderful goddess to connect with, I think, in the relationship. And that's the one that kind of goes back to thinking of like the Wayne Dyer quote, you attract what you want, not what you are. Because Parvati is in this committed, loving relationship, but she's also sovereign. She still has her own spiritual practices. She still has she's still her own person. And I think for women, that can be challenging to, keep that sense of sovereignty, and also that desire to merge as well too, right? It's like kind of like the paradox. We kind of have to hold both of them. Like, we're sovereign and whole as we are, but we still have a desire to connect and merge. And I think we can kind of look at Parvati to kind of continue to cultivate the personhood that we want to be, but also cultivating that feminine energy that opens us up to receive as well.
That's the part, I think when you get to this stage and you're looking for a relationship, and we're complete. I mean, most of them probably have already been married. They have children. It's a whole different dynamic from when we were in our 20s looking.
Yes.
And trying to navigate through that and understanding. And I'm speaking to a lot of my listeners and they know who they are. But after reading your book, I thought, gosh, if I could help them understand these goddesses, when they're out there navigating through these men that, it's just a different experience, and where they want to be in their life and who they are and who they've become. It's like a whole different experience who you are now at this age, out there trying to find this amazing relationship.
Yeah, in some ways, I feel like at this age, it can be a little bit more empowering to women, because as we were talking, you get into your late 20s, early 30s, and you feel like you need to check a box. Like, I need to do this, I need to do this. And it ends up being a game of musical chairs. Like, who am I going to be with at this age, when everyone's getting married? And it seems a little unintentional. Whereas I feel like as you get older, you do become a little bit more sovereign. You don't need someone else. You can enjoy being with someone else, but there's not that need of like, oh, am I going to get married? Am I going to have kids? Like, do I have to check these boxes? You can kind of go into it with like, do I enjoy this person?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is empowering. If I had to go and do that now, you think of what a different, I remember when I met Richard, it was, I want to find my soulmate. And I had built my life to where I was happy with who I was, and I do know that you attract who you are, not what you want. And I was so clear. And then I knew I wanted children, and, it's like that. And I was like in my mid 30s. So, not long ago, but when you think of your life, how it takes you, and then to begin again, and then it'd be a whole different experience, but it is an empowering thing, because I know really who I am. Explain that, like in someone that really knows who they are. They have the Parvati, right? They have that going for energy. What would you take them down a road? What would they?
That's going to feel, I think, their road of just kind of building that confidence. And I mean, this has come difficult to me. So I always say, like, we end up getting into like a lot of these practices generally because it's like we feel bad about something, or we're trying to heal something. For me, it's like I felt like I had kind of a lot of anxiety in relationships, and I knew that didn't feel right. So that's kind of even what got me a lot on this path, was that anxiety. And I think it's really starting to understand that we don't need anybody else, right? And we can start to look at our relationships too as like, I wrote an essay that it was as our spiritual assignments. They really show us a mirror of the areas where we need to heal. Like, well, what's triggering us? And we can kind of look at it that way too. Like, if I don't get a text every hour, like, what is that saying about me? It's less about the other person. So we can almost even use that other person as a mirror without getting so caught up in the story, and kind of understand, like, this is a great tool to show us areas of where we need to focus so we can evolve.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That is the greatest explanation. I have a friend that is coming from two relationships where they used to text all the time and it was super needy. And I said, well, that's a mirror of you. Like that is who you are. I could never have been in that relationship I was telling her that, because that's not me. I'm not needy. I don't need that text every 5 minutes and that reassurance. And now she's met someone else. And the other day he's not texting. I go, perfect. Perfect. That's what you want. So maybe, like that's perfect. We don't need the needy part. You're not needy. So let that go. Right.
Yeah. And it's kind of, I think it's just kind of a great way to kind of like understand, like, what are you attracting? And I mean, sometimes we're going to attract things. It doesn't necessarily mean that is what we are. Sometimes, like my teacher, Katie Silcox, is like, we attract things sometimes because we're just attractive, but it might not be what we want. So it's also kind of using that discernment as well.
Right. What's on your plan for the next year, 5 years ahead of you? What are you looking toward doing? Writing more books?
I would like to write another book. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is kind of like, how do we make magic from the mundane? Like, how are we better integrating our spiritual life with our everyday life? Like, as far as like taking care of our children, like we're divine matriarchs, ushering a new set of deities in, like, and really kind of taking a little bit more accountability for our different roles, but also just making it more fun, like adding a little bit more magic to kind of the everyday life, like just through different rituals and just shifting the perspective as far as like what it is that we're doing, whether it's relationships or laundry or work, and making it a little bit more inspiring. So that's one of the things that I'm working on right now, and continuing on with the Goddess Solution, my masterclass as well, and really kind of building out that program because that's relatively new as well.
Oh, neat. How do you view COVID and this transition in our life right now?
I mean, I feel like it was really, it's funny. This is a hard one for me because at the beginning, I felt like it was the sacred pause, that everything needed to be recalibrated. I'm like, this must be what the universe is telling us, that something is off, whether it's what we're doing with the environment or whether we're working too much and we're not spending enough time with our loved ones. But like, this is an opportunity to recalibrate. And that was kind of my idea. But now that it's kind of going on, I don't feel like we've learned our lesson, whatever it is. I don't feel like we're there. It's funny. I actually like wrote an essay about that, thinking like, I feel like there was a lesson we were supposed to get from it. And I think it has eluded us to some extent. I mean, we seem more polarized than ever. We seem to have missed the point of the lesson. Like, I think there was one there, but I just don't think that we've captured it.
Oh, that's funny. I look back at those days and I remember going, you on the news and I remember going back to the 40 days were in the Bible. Oh, I know. That's the lesson. It's only going to be 40 days. And then the 40-day came and 41 and 42. I'm like, maybe it's not that. But when you see the polarity and to be there now, still going into 2022, 2 years into this, how far have we come? Where are we moving toward? I know we're all ascending. I know in my heart, I feel like this all is happening, the earth changing, all this, the polarity, the education system, all the things there's a shift. There had to be a shift. And so, and I know that we chose to be here during this time because we can help people transcend to that next, wherever we're going. But I believe it's toward more love, toward, this harmony, this beauty that you've talked about, these God, you look at life and the books that come out now and the people that you are on, the people that come on my podcast, this ascension that, this light that people are searching for, and they're like seekers, and it's all of a sudden come and they're like taking this, and I can see this shift. It's really shown up in my life a lot in the last, 6 months. I've seen a huge shift.
That's good. Yeah, I think, I think COVID has shown us that we can't control really outside factors that much. So what we can control is how we respond to it, our own energy. And I think that has also helped people want to take their spiritual life and self-development a little bit further, because it's become more important that we have kind of a stronger foundation internally, that some of the structures that we thought were there to support us don't necessarily, in that, I would like to see us come together a bit more as a community. I think the polarization between like the vaccines versus no vaccines, I think isn't that productive. Like, I feel like there needs to be a little bit more compassion and goodwill towards people who have different
Right.
opinions than others, which I get nervous that I don't see enough of that.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting to look back at just a 2-year period of time and see the beginning to now, and what really in our life have we allowed it to grow us? Have we allowed it to, see who you truly are? I feel like, talk
Yeah.
about looking in a mirror,
Right.
who are you? Who am I? And to be, as I think as a parent having kids during this time, I believe that I loved parenting them during this time, because I think it's just showing the gratitude of life. You never take things for granted. Look at what you get to do now that we never, taking little things away from kids at the age our kids were, especially, but to know that as a young teen, that, oh, I can't see my friends. Oh, I can't go to that. Oh, I can't go to a birthday party, or, I can't have a birthday, all the little things that you got to do your whole life. It's their childhood story. This is part of their childhood. So I love that believe me, I look at things as it's the beauty of life, and I don't look at it as bad. I look at it as good. And I taught my girls to look at it as good.
Yeah.
Because you can sit there and look how bad it is, and where does that get you?
Yes, it doesn't. No, it's kind of like we always have to find the beauty in any situation, right?
Right?
That's what we
Yes.
do, and what do we have to be grateful for?
Yes.
So,
Okay. I could continue on, but here's your little book for my viewers
yeah.
that I love so much. And thank you for sending that.
Oh, you're
And it's
welcome.
The Goddess Solution. It's Lisa Marie Rankin on the website.
Yes.
What else? Anything?
Yeah,
We
Lisa
can find
Marie
everything
Rankin
on
on
your
my
website.
website. Everything is on my website. So my different essays, information about my course, and social media. So we can just
Yes.
direct people there.
And it's always Lisa Marie
Yes.
Rankin. Yes.
Yep. Lisa Marie Rankin.
It's been so fun. Such a fun
Okay.
conversation. So fun and so different. And, it takes my curiosity and I will look at my goddess, it opens my eyes to a lot of different ways of thinking. And I think it's beautiful that you found that. And it's been so fun talking to you.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.